In a quiet suburban town where life moved slowly and neighbors trusted each other, Dr. Michael Turner built his reputation as one of the most respected therapists in the area. His office, a cozy place filled with warm colors and calming scents, was a safe space for many. People came to him with their secrets, their pain, and their broken hearts, and he listened carefully, offering comfort and guidance. To the outside world, Michael was a man of integrity, someone who genuinely cared about the well-being of his patients. His wife, Sarah, often spoke proudly of him, believing she was married to a man who changed lives for the better. But behind the calm exterior, Michael carried secrets of his own secrets that would eventually lead to the destruction of everything he had built. Emily Sanders first came to Michael's office as just another patient. She was a young woman, in her late 20s, struggling with severe anxiety and depression. She had just gone through a painful breakup that shattered her confidence and left her feeling worthless. Her life had lost all direction, and she was desperate for someone to pull her out of the darkness. Michael welcomed her, as he did with all his patients, but something about Emily lingered in his mind long after their first session ended. There was something vulnerable about her, something that made him feel needed in a way he hadn't felt in years. As the weeks passed, Emily's therapy sessions grew longer. She started opening up more, sharing details of her life that she had never told anyone else. Michael found himself deeply engaged, not just as her therapist, but as someone who was emotionally invested in her recovery. He told himself that his extra attention was part of his responsibility, that he was simply helping someone who desperately needed support. But over time, their relationship quietly shifted into something far more personal, without realizing it. Michael began breaking small boundaries. A coffee after a session, a comforting touch that lingered a little too long, text messages that went beyond professional check-ins. It was easy to justify at first. Emily was fragile, and he convinced himself that he was her only support system. But soon, their meetings moved outside the safety of his office walls. They met in secluded places, away from anyone who might recognize them. Their connection grew stronger, and the thrill of secrecy made it even harder for Michael to stop. Emily, on the other hand, fell deeply in love with him. For her, Michael wasn't just a therapist, he became her entire world, the one person who made her feel valued and understood. She clung to every word he said, every promise he made, no matter how vague. She started to believe that Michael loved her in the same way, that he would eventually leave his wife and build a life with her. What Emily didn't see was that Michael never planned to destroy his family. He wanted the affair to remain hidden, a secret escape from the pressures of his life. At home, Sarah Turner noticed nothing unusual. She continued to support her husband, proud of the difference he was making in people's lives. She had no idea that her trust was slowly being betrayed, that the man she loved was living a dangerous double life. Michael thought he was in control, carefully managing his two worlds without letting them collide. He never imagined that Emily's feelings would grow into something he could no longer manage, something that would eventually turn his life upside down. In the quiet comfort of his office, Michael had crossed a line he could never uncross. What started as innocent therapy had become the beginning of a story that would end in tragedy. And the first step had already been taken. Though neither of them fully understood the darkness that lay ahead, Emily's feelings for Michael deepened in ways that neither of them could have predicted. What began as admiration quickly turned into an uncontrollable obsession. She filled her days thinking about him, replaying every word he had ever spoken to her. analyzing every gesture, every text, every moment they had spent together. Her entire life slowly narrowed down to a single focus: Michael. Her work, her friendships, and even her family faded into the background. Nothing mattered anymore except the time she spent with him and the dream she built in her mind of a future where they could finally be together without hiding. She became more curious about Michael's personal life, especially his wife, Sarah. Emily imagined Sarah as the enemy, the one person standing between her and happiness. The more she thought about Sarah, the more Emily's mind filled with resentment. Sarah had the life Emily wanted, the life she believed she deserved. Michael's warm house, his time, his affection, all of it belonged to Sarah, and it drove Emily to the edge. She began following Sarah around town, watching her from a distance as she went grocery shopping, picked up coffee, or visited friends. Emily learned Sarah's routines, the places she visited regularly, the times she would leave home alone. With each passing day, Emily's curiosity became darker, and her resentment burned hotter. Michael, meanwhile, began to feel the weight of his choices. The excitement of the affair started to fade, replaced by growing guilt and fear. He realized the risk he was taking, not just with his marriage, but with his career and his entire life. He knew that if anyone found out about the relationship, it would ruin him. The thought of losing everything terrified him. He started pulling away from Emily, keeping their sessions shorter, ignoring her messages, and creating distance wherever he could. He told himself that ending things quietly would be best for both of them. But Michael underestimated just how deeply Emily had fallen. His silence didn't push her away, it only made her more desperate to hold on. Emily noticed every shift in Michael's behavior. She felt the growing space between them, like a wound that refused to heal. His attempts to end the relationship were, in her mind, proof that Sarah was winning. Emily couldn't accept being left behind, not after everything they had shared. Not after all the promises she believed he had made. She convinced herself that Michael was trapped in his marriage, too afraid to make the first move. If Sarah was no longer in the picture, Emily believed Michael would finally be free. The solution seemed painfully simple to her. If Sarah disappeared, their problems would disappear with her. Emily's obsession twisted into something far more dangerous. She started researching methods of attack, studying the nearby parks, looking for places without cameras, timing Sarah's movements with precision. The thoughts that once would have frightened her now felt strangely comforting. She believed she was taking control of her life, that removing Sarah was the final step toward the happiness she had always dreamed of. Emily became fixated on Saturday mornings, when Sarah took her regular walks alone. It was the perfect window, a routine so consistent that it almost seemed like an invitation. Michael, unaware of how far Emily had drifted from reason, continued his life as though distance would solve the problem. He ignored her increasingly emotional texts, thinking she would eventually move on. He didn't see the silent storm building behind her calm appearance. He didn't notice the signs of danger because he was too focused on protecting his own reputation. He believed the situation was still under his control, but Emily was no longer waiting for Michael to choose. In her mind, the decision had already been made. She was ready to take the next step, believing that love sometimes demanded sacrifices. She had convinced herself that the future she wanted was just within reach, and nothing, not even another life, would stand in her way. Emily's plan moved from dark fantasies to careful preparation. She had already memorized Sarah's Saturday routine down to the smallest detail. Every week, Sarah left her house at the same time, walked the same path, and always carried the same small water bottle in her hand. There were no security cameras along the wooded trail she often chose, and very few people walked there that early in the morning. Emily had studied the area for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She felt strangely calm, almost as if she had already crossed the point of no return. That Saturday morning arrived cold and quiet, the streets still empty, the sky covered in soft gray clouds. Emily parked her car several blocks away and walked the remaining distance with a hoodie pulled low over her face. She carried a metal rod carefully wrapped in cloth, tucked inside a simple sports bag to avoid suspicion. Her steps were steady, her heart beating faster but not out of fear. In her mind, she was not committing a crime, she was freeing herself, opening the door to the life she believed was meant to be hers. She waited near a bend in the trail where trees grew thick and the ground dipped out of sight from the main path. Emily knew exactly when Sarah would pass by, and when the moment came, she stepped onto the trail quietly behind her. Sarah had no reason to look back, no reason to feel unsafe. Emily quickened her steps, closing the distance between them without hesitation. She struck with brutal force, leaving no chance for Sarah to react or escape. The attack was quick, silent, and devastating. Emily dragged the body a few steps off the trail and left it partially covered by fallen leaves and branches. Her mind felt strangely blank as she walked away from the scene, disposing of the weapon along the route and carefully returning to her car. She believed she had executed everything perfectly, with no one around to witness the crime. To Emily, this was the beginning of a new chapter, the life she had been waiting for. She expected Michael to come running to her, heartbroken and in need of comfort, and she was ready to be the one to heal him. Later that day, Michael called the police when Sarah didn't return from her walk. Panic spread quickly through the neighborhood as search teams began scouring the nearby areas. Flyers were printed, and local news stations reported Sarah's sudden disappearance. Friends and family gathered around Michael, offering support, unaware of the dark secret that had led to this moment. Michael appeared shattered, overcome with grief, unable to process what had happened. For Emily, it felt like the plan was working. She sent Michael messages of sympathy, pretending to be just another concerned friend. She expected him to lean on her, to eventually draw closer in his time of sorrow. But Michael's reaction wasn't what she imagined. He withdrew from everyone, including Emily, shutting himself off from the world. He barely responded to her messages, consumed by guilt and pain. 2 days after Sarah's disappearance, her body was found by a jogger who had taken a shortcut through the wooded trail. The police immediately launched a full investigation, focusing on the people closest to Sarah. They questioned Michael, searched for potential enemies, and reviewed security cameras around the neighborhood and nearby streets. Emily carefully watched the investigation unfold, convinced that she had left no trace, that her secret would remain safe. But small details began to surface, details Emily had overlooked. The police discovered a blurry figure in security footage from a nearby street, a person following Sarah just minutes before she was last seen. It was a faint clue, but it was enough to keep the investigation alive. Emily believed she had covered her tracks perfectly, but the walls were quietly starting to close in. The investigation picked up speed as detectives began combing through every available piece of evidence. The blurry figure captured on a neighbor's security camera became the focus of their attention. The footage wasn't clear enough to show a face, but the general size, clothing, and the way the person moved gave them clues. The person appeared to be female, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and walking steadily behind Sarah just before she vanished. Investigators began looking for cars parked in the area that morning. One vehicle caught their eye, a small sedan that appeared in several nearby traffic cameras. Shortly before and after the time of Sarah's disappearance, the license plate led them to Emily Sanders. Initially, her name didn't raise suspicion beyond the fact that she was a patient of Michael Turner. On the surface, it seemed possible she might have simply been in the area by coincidence. But detectives didn't rely on coincidence. They wanted to know more about her connection to Michael, especially after discovering multiple phone calls and text messages exchanged between them, far outside the boundaries of a normal patient-therapist relationship. Emily had tried to protect herself by deleting messages and call logs from her phone, but forensic experts managed to recover the deleted data. What they found changed the direction of the case completely. The messages revealed that Emily and Michael had been in contact almost constantly, sharing deeply personal and emotional exchanges that clearly pointed to an inappropriate relationship. Even more damning was the discovery that Emily had messaged Michael just minutes after Sarah was last seen alive. The timing was impossible to ignore. As the detectives dug deeper, they realized Emily had a pattern of contacting Michael shortly after Sarah's routine morning walks in previous weeks. It was as if Emily had been carefully monitoring Sarah's movements, possibly rehearsing her plan in the weeks leading up to the murder. The evidence grew stronger when they cross-checked Emily's phone GPS data with traffic cameras, proving she had been in the area that morning, despite her earlier claim that she had been at home. When the detectives interviewed Emily, she struggled to keep her story straight. She insisted she had been nowhere near the park, but when confronted with the GPS records and security footage, her confidence started to crack. She attempted to explain away the evidence, suggesting coincidence, wrong place, wrong time. But her explanations didn't align with the growing mountain of proof against her. Investigators also found that Emily had recently searched online for the park's layout, the location of nearby security cameras, and even basic questions about how long it took for bodies to be discovered in wooded areas. These search histories painted a clear picture of premeditation. Emily had not acted in a moment of rage. She had carefully planned every step. Meanwhile, Michael was slowly beginning to understand the nightmare unfolding around him. He had thought cutting off contact would be enough to protect himself. He never imagined that Emily would go so far. His guilt overwhelmed him as the detectives pressed him about the true nature of their relationship. He admitted to the affair, his voice heavy with regret, but insisted he had no knowledge of Emily's violent intentions. Whether or not Michael was fully truthful, the evidence at hand placed the murder squarely on Emily's shoulders. The detectives moved quickly, arresting Emily and charging her with Sarah's murder. What Emily believed had been a perfect crime was now collapsing around her. The security cameras, the GPS tracking, the deleted messages, all the small things she thought didn't matter had silently worked against her. The walls were closing in, and the secret life she had built was falling apart piece by piece. Emily's arrest sent shockwaves through the quiet suburban town. The community, once filled with admiration for Dr. Michael Turner, was now buzzing with disbelief. A well-respected therapist caught in a scandal that had spiraled into murder was a story no one could have predicted. As Emily sat in her jail cell, the world she had carefully constructed crumbled around her. What she had seen as a love story had transformed into a criminal case that would follow her forever. The trial moved quickly. Prosecutors presented the overwhelming evidence against Emily, the recovered messages, the GPS data, the surveillance footage, and her internet search history that detailed a disturbing level of preparation. Emily showed no outward emotion as the details of her crime were laid out in court. Her face remained calm, even as the jury listened to the timeline of events that pointed directly to her guilt. To the prosecutors, she was a dangerous woman who had crossed all boundaries, driven by obsession to eliminate an innocent life. To the public, she became a symbol of how quickly forbidden relationships can spiral into destruction. Michael sat quietly during the proceedings, his life in complete ruin. He had lost his wife, his reputation, and his career. Though he was not charged with Sarah's murder, the court and the public view his actions as the starting point of the entire tragedy. His unethical relationship with Emily had set everything in motion. The affair that had once seemed thrilling now haunted him. His colleagues turned away from him, former friends abandoned him, and he found himself completely isolated. The professional world he had built over years vanished overnight. His medical license was revoked, and he became a public disgrace. Emily's defense tried to argue that her fragile mental state and her deep, emotional dependence on Michael clouded her judgment. They attempted to present her as a woman who had been manipulated, who had misunderstood the nature of the relationship. But the evidence of careful planning destroyed any chance of sympathy. Emily had made a choice, step by step, to carry out the crime. Her searches, her tracking of Sarah, and the brutal way she executed the murder left little doubt about her intent. The jury reached a verdict swiftly. Emily was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her plan to build a future with Michael ended with her behind bars, her freedom stripped away. Even as the sentence was announced, Emily showed little reaction, as if the reality of her situation had not fully reached her. Perhaps, in her mind, she still believed that her actions were justified, that love could excuse the lines she had crossed. Michael's punishment came in different forms. T.